The desperate escape. The night was dark on the planet Xyrian, and cold winds blew through the tall black trees. Ravi ran as fast as her small legs could carry her. She was just a child, but fear made her stronger. Behind her, she heard the sharp metal steps of Rothan soldiers chasing her. Their glowing eyes lit up the forest like hunting lights. She did not look back. She couldn't. Her heart was pounding, her lungs burning, but she kept running. She held something tight in her hand, a small, glowing pendant. It was the last thing her mother gave her before they were separated. "Run, Ravi," her mother had whispered. "Find a human. They can help." Now she was alone, scared, and hunted. She hid behind a rock, holding her breath as two soldiers passed by. They spoke in their harsh, cold language, scanning the area with their weapons. One of them stopped, looking toward Ravi's hiding place. She clutched the pendant tighter, and the soft light seemed to dim. The soldier turned away, and they moved on. Ravi waited a moment, then slipped away silently, near the edge of the forest. A small escape pod waited. She had stolen it from the Rothan hangar. Her mother had told her the coordinates, a planet called Earth, a place where humans lived, a place full of danger, but also hope. As she climbed into the pod, she looked back once. The sky above the prison dome glowed red. She could almost hear her mother's voice. "Be brave." The pod launched, flying into the sky with a low hum. Stars stretched across space as Ravi watched from the small window. She had never been alone before. She had never left her homeworld. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't cry. She couldn't. The journey through space was quiet, too quiet. The pod shook once. Then again, systems were failing, and a warning light blinked red. Ravi gasped. Trying to remember what her mother told her, she pressed a few buttons, holding her breath. The pod kept moving, but the engine was dying. She was close to Earth, but not close enough. Suddenly, a large planet came into view, blue and green, just like in the old pictures. Earth. Her pod began falling fast, fire glowing around it as it entered the atmosphere. Ravi closed her eyes and whispered, "Please, don't let me die before I find a human." The pod crashed into a quiet forest near an old human town. Smoke rose into the air, and Ravi was barely conscious. Her head hurt, and her vision was blurry. She crawled out, falling onto the soft ground. The world was spinning, and everything smelled strange. Footsteps came, heavy and fast. Ravi tried to move, but her body wouldn't listen. Then a shadow fell over her. A man stood there, tall and human, with tired eyes and a long coat. He had a tool in one hand and a weapon in the other. He stared at Ravi, confused and alarmed. "What the hell?" he whispered, kneeling beside her. Ravi looked up at him with pain in her eyes. "You're human," she said, her voice weak. "Please, help us. They took my mom, locked her in a cage." The man blinked, shocked. He had seen strange things in his time, but never this. A young alien child, half dead, begging for help. Something inside him moved, a feeling he hadn't felt in years. Without another word, he picked her up and carried her away from the crash site. More soldiers might come, but for now, he had a mission. He didn't know who this girl was, or what she had escaped from. But he knew one thing. He was human, and he couldn't ignore a cry for help. Deep in the sky above, a Rothan warship picked up the crash signal. A cold voice spoke into the darkness. "The girl is on Earth." Another voice replied, "Send a squad, and burn everything, asterisk the human." Stranger, the wind howled through the trees as James Carter carried the small alien girl through the forest. Her body was cold, and her skin felt like soft stone. He had never seen anyone like her before, but somehow, she didn't scare him. She was a child, wounded, and scared. That was enough. He reached his cabin, hidden deep in the woods, far from any city. He lived alone now, by choice. No neighbors, no noise, no war, only quiet. James kicked open the old wooden door and laid Ravi on the couch. She was breathing, but weak. Her glowing pendant pulsed softly on her chest. like a heartbeat. He stared at it, unsure if it was magic or technology, maybe both. He grabbed a medkit from the shelf and started cleaning the cut on her head. As he worked, his mind raced. Who was she? Where did she come from? And what did she mean by "they locked my mom in a cage"? Ravi opened her eyes slowly. The warm light of a fire lit the room, and she felt a blanket over her. She sat up quickly, afraid, until she saw the human man again. "You didn't leave me," she whispered, surprised. James looked at her and nodded once. "I don't leave people behind," he said softly. "Name's James." "I'm Ravi," she replied, her voice shaking. "I came from Xyrian, a planet in the dark sectors." She paused, then added, "They took my mother, the Routhans. They hate our kind." James's face hardened. He knew that name, Routhans. He had fought them once, a long time ago. They were slavers, empire builders, cruel and cold. He thought Earth had cut ties with them. Maybe not. Why? "Come to Earth?" he asked, sitting across from her. "Because humans fight back," Ravi said, looking into his eyes. "Other species hide, or bow. But not you. You build ships that shake planets. You scare them." James almost smiled. He had heard similar words years ago, back when he was still in the human navy, back when he still believed in saving others. Now, he lived in the shadows of those memories. Ravi clutched the pendant tightly. "My mother gave me this. It's encoded with Rothan data. It can show you where she's being kept, I think. But I don't know how to use it." James leaned closer, inspecting the glowing stone. It had old Earth tech mixed with something alien. "Looks like an old quantum tracker," he muttered. "Where did your mother get this?" "She worked with humans," Ravi said. "She was a translator and scientist. During the Earth-Xyrian peace talks, they arrested her for helping you." James stood up, walking to a nearby shelf. He pulled out a dusty case and opened it. Inside was a silver badge, the symbol of the United Human Fleet. He hadn't worn it in years, but it still meant something to him, and maybe now to her. "I used to be someone," James said quietly, "before the war ended, before the government changed. I watched good people vanish, and I did nothing. Maybe it's time I fix that." Ravi's eyes lit up. "You'll help me?" He nodded once. "I'll help you get your mother back." Suddenly, a loud beep came from Ravi's pendant, a warning signal, pulsing red. "They're tracking me," she said in a panic. "They'll come here." James grabbed a tablet and tapped the screen. A map appeared, showing a blinking red dot in orbit. "Rothan scout ship," he said, voice cold and calm. "They're already here." He turned to Ravi, all softness gone from his face. "You ever flown a ship?" Ravi blinked, confused. "No." "Then you're about to learn," he said, tossing her a small communicator. "We need to leave, now, outside." The trees rustled as shadows moved between them. Metal feet stomped over leaves, and red lights searched the dark. Rothan soldiers had landed, and they were not here to talk, but James Carter was ready, and this time, he would not run. The forgotten ship. James and Ravi moved quickly through the forest. The wind whispered between the trees, but louder still were the distant metal footsteps behind them. The Routhans were here, and they would not stop. James knew the land, every path, every hiding place, but this time, he didn't plan to hide. He guided Ravi to a narrow path between the rocks. Thick vines covered the entrance, hiding a steep slope leading underground. "Where are we going?" Ravi asked, panting. "To something the Routhans forgot," James said, pushing forward. "Something they feared once." The tunnel was old and dark, but lined with steel. A long time ago, it had been part of a military outpost, one of many left behind after the last human war. Most people didn't know it was here. That's why James had chosen this place. They reached a large steel door at the bottom of the tunnel. James pressed his hand on a scanner. A soft beep echoed, followed by a long silence. Then, the door opened with a hiss, revealing a massive chamber beyond. Lights flickered to life one by one, showing a large hangar carved into the mountain. In the center, resting on a platform, was a warship, long, silver, and scarred from battle. It looked like a sleeping beast, waiting for someone to wake it. Ravi's eyes widened. That's human-made, she whispered. James nodded. She's called the Aegis, he said, walking toward it, last of her kind. He ran his hand across the metal surface. I helped build her, he added, back when humans still explored the stars. She's got stealth, weapons, old AI systems, even a deep space drive. Ravi stepped closer. In her eyes. Why did you hide it? James looked back at her, his face heavy with old pain. Because Earth gave up, he said. They made peace by staying quiet. They buried ships like this, and the people who flew them. Ravi looked at the ship, then at James. But you didn't forget, she said. James smiled. Just a little. No, he replied. I didn't. They entered the Aegis through a side ramp, and lights turned on as they moved inside. The control room was dusty but strong, its panels still glowing faintly. James powered up the systems, and a soft voice echoed through the ship. Welcome back, Commander Carter. Ravi jumped, surprised. Is that a voice? James nodded. The ship's AI, he said, still remembers me. They moved through the rooms, checking systems, running diagnostics. Ravi touched everything with wonder. This ship feels alive, she whispered. James didn't answer, but he knew what she meant. Outside, deep sensors picked up movement. The Routhans were closing in, and fast. James looked at the radar screen and frowned. They're scanning for energy signals, he said. We have 10 minutes, maybe. Lassie turned to Ravi, handing her a small tablet. You'll need to help me in flight, he said. I've set the controls to assist mode. Follow what I say, and you'll be fine. Ravi nodded quickly. I can do it. James looked at her for a moment, then said, You're braver than most soldiers I've known. The engines of the Aegis hummed as power returned. Lights grew brighter, systems came online, and the ship began to breathe again. James sat in the pilot's chair, Ravi beside him. The old ship shook slightly as the hangar doors above began to open. A beam of moonlight poured down as trees cracked and fell. Above, red lights danced in the sky. The Routhans were here. Ready? James asked, gripping the controls. Ravi nodded, her hands shaking. Just a little. Let's fly. With a roar, the Aegis lifted off the platform. Dust and metal scattered below as the ship pushed through the mountaintop. The ground shook and trees bent under the force. The Rothan soldiers looked up in shock as the silver ship broke through the earth and climbed into the sky. They fired at it, but the Aegis moved fast, dodging their blasts. James pressed a switch, and the ship vanished from sight. Stealth engaged. The AI said calmly, Good girl, James whispered. Ravi watched Earth fade behind them as they climbed into the stars. You really are what they say, she said softly. Humans. Don't run. James didn't answer. He just looked ahead, eyes set on the stars. And somewhere, out there, on a cold prison station, Ravi's mother was waiting. The chase begins. The Aegis flew silently through the cold dark of space. Its silver body blended with the stars, hidden by ancient human stealth tech. Inside, Ravi sat beside James, staring at the endless black sky. It was beautiful and terrifying. She had never left her planet before this. Now, she was chasing ghosts in the stars. James sat at the controls, his eyes focused. The screen showed dozens of red dots blinking behind them. They're following us, Ravi said, her voice low. James nodded. They tracked the jump trail, faster than I thought. How many? 3 Rothan patrol ships, he replied. Maybe more soon. Ravi's hands gripped the edge of her seat. What do we do? James didn't blink. We run smarter than they chase. He pressed a few buttons and brought up the star map. There was a narrow space corridor called the Rift, a twisted path filled with magnetic storms and asteroid clusters. Normal ships avoided it, but James knew it like an old friend. We'll go through here, he said. They won't risk it, Ravi frowned. Won't we die in there? James smiled. Only if we fly like they do. As they approached the rift, the stars began to disappear behind glowing clouds of dust. Sparks of electric storms danced between rocks the size of mountains. The Aegis shook slightly as it entered. Stay with me, James said, his voice calm but sharp. Ravi watched as he moved the ship through tight turns, dodging space debris and magnetic pulls. One wrong move, and they'd be torn apart. But James moved like water, flowing between danger. The ship twisted, flipped, and dove with perfect grace. Ravi couldn't speak, only watch. Behind them, two Rothan ships entered the rift. They were larger, stronger, but not smarter. One tried to follow their path directly. It slammed into a spinning asteroid and exploded in a flash of light. Ravi jumped in her seat, eyes wide. James didn't even look back. Did you used to be a pilot? Ravi asked finally. I was. A builder, James said, but I flew sometimes. The second Rothan ship fired a missile. The Aegis AI warned them instantly. Incoming projectile. 12 seconds to impact. James flipped a switch, and a side panel opened to reveal the ship's old weapon system. I haven't used these in years, he muttered. He locked onto the missile and fired a pulse cannon. The blast met the missile mid-space, creating a silent burst of blue fire. Ravi stared at the smoke trail and whispered, Humans really are different. James said nothing, but for the first time, she saw the edge in his eyes, the part of him that had seen war and survived it. The final Rothan ship stayed behind, watching the rift from a distance. They were waiting for James to come out. They'll call for reinforcements, Ravi said. James nodded. We need to disappear. He activated the Aegis's deep jump core, an old human invention most species still didn't understand. It allowed the ship to vanish into slipspace, a silent jump between stars, but it took time to charge. We have 5 minutes, the AI warned. Ravi stood up and asked, What can I do? James looked at her, then handed her a data pad. Power from the rear engines to the core. Use this code. Ravi worked quickly, fingers trembling but learning fast. She had watched her mother do this once. Now it was her turn. The lights in the ship dimmed as power shifted. The engine hummed louder. 1 minute left, the AI announced. Suddenly, a new alert blinked red. Another Rothan ship had arrived at the rift's edge. Ravi's breath caught. They'll fire? They won't get the chance, James said, gripping the controls tighter. He turned the ship sharply, using the magnetic pull of a nearby asteroid to slingshot around it. The ship soared at impossible speed, dodging plasma shots by inches. Jump ready in 10, the AI called. The new Rothan ship locked onto them, charging weapons. James and Ravi held their breath. 3, 2, 1, jump activated. The Aegis vanished in a blink of white light. The stars stretched and twisted, then calmed. Silence returned. Ravi looked out the window. The stars unfamiliar again. Where are we? James checked the map. Near Rothan territory, he said. 1 step closer to your mother. Ravi leaned back, her hands shaking, but her eyes strong. I want to help, she said. I don't want to just watch. James looked at her, for a long moment. Then you'll need to learn fast, he replied, because next, we're breaking into a prison. Prison break. The Rothan prison station floated in space like a metal scar. It was black, sharp, and cold. No windows, no beauty, only fear. Ships came and went, but none ever left with hope. Inside, prisoners were numbers, and pain was normal. From behind a frozen asteroid, the Aegis watched silently. Invisible under its ancient stealth field, it was a ghost among machines. James stood at the command console, studying the prison's rotating patrol patterns. They change formations every 17 minutes, he muttered. That's our window. Ravi stood beside him, wearing a simple black suit James had given her. It was too big, but she wore it like armor. Her eyes no longer looked scared. They burned with something sharper. Will she recognize me? Ravi whispered. She will, James said. She never stopped hoping. He tapped the panel, and a small pod extended from the Aegis's side. This will take us close, he said. But once inside, we're on our own. Ravi climbed in first, her hands steady. James followed, carrying a small energy weapon and a scanner. Just like old times, he muttered to himself. The pod launched, slipping between sensor lines and drifting toward a cargo port under the station. When it landed, they crawled through a maintenance shaft, cold and tight. Metal groaned around them like the station was alive and angry. Inside, the prison was worse than Ravi imagined. Dark walls, buzzing lights, and silence filled with distant screams. They moved fast, using stolen codes. James still remembered. Every door opened with a soft hiss. Every corner held a shadow. James checked the scanner. She's in cell block 4, he said. Close. Ravi felt her heart pound. Her legs wanted to run, but she forced herself to walk. She had come too far to stop now. They passed cells filled with aliens of every kind. Some looked up eyes, full of fear. Others didn't move at all. Ravi wanted to help them all, but James whispered, one at a time. Finally, they reached a small cell, guarded by 2 soldiers, Rothans in black armor, bored but alert. James handed Ravi a small device. Flash bomb, he said. Throw it, and close your eyes. Ravi nodded, then took a deep breath. She stepped into the hallway, heart pounding, and tossed the device. A bright light exploded, and the guards shouted. James ran in, stunning both with silent blasts. The door to the cell opened slowly. Inside, Ravi saw a shape curled on the floor, thin, bruised, and trembling. Mom, she whispered. The woman turned slowly, her eyes blinking. For a moment, she didn't believe it. Then she reached out with shaking hands. Ravi. They ran into each other's arms. And for the first time since the escape, Ravi cried. James stood back, watching quietly. There was no time for long talks, but this moment mattered, even in war. Love still had a place. Ravi's mother looked up at James. You're human, she said softly. Thanks to you, I still am, James replied suddenly. Alarms blared through the station. Unauthorized breach detected, the voice said. They know, James growled. We have to move. He led them through a side corridor, but the lights turned red. Doors began locking down, and soldiers filled the halls. We're trapped, Ravi said, her voice rising. James shook his head. Not yet. He pressed a panel on the wall and activated a hidden emergency shaft. Crawl fast, he said. They climbed in, metal scraping around them as they slid through narrow tunnels. Behind them, footsteps grew louder. Just as they reached the exit hatch near the hangar, a tall figure blocked the path. He wore silver armor with red eyes glowing from his helmet. A Rothan general, I've been waiting for you, he said. His voice was deep and sharp like a knife. You must be the human. James stepped forward. Gun raised. Move, he said. The general smiled under the helmet. You humans still believe in heroes. Before James could fire, the general threw a shock blade. It hit James in the shoulder, and he dropped to one knee. Ravi screamed, pulling him back. Her mother grabbed the weapon and fired blindly at the general, pushing him back. But he didn't fall, only laughed. James stood again, blood on his arm. He hit a small button on his wrist. Ship, lock onto my signal, he whispered. The wall exploded beside them as the Aegis opened a breach. A magnetic lift pulled them in as the general shouted behind. They escaped just as the hangar collapsed in fire and smoke. Inside the ship, James collapsed in pain. Ravi knelt beside him, her hands shaking. You saved her, she whispered. James smiled weakly. And I'm not done yet. Asterisk the final stanza. Aegis shook violently as it escaped the prison station. Red warning lights flashed through the ship, and the engines groaned like a wounded beast. Smoke filled the halls, and sparks rained from the ceiling. James Carter sat slumped in the pilot's chair, his arm bleeding. He was pale, breathing hard, but he kept flying. Behind him, Ravi held her mother close, whispering softly to keep her calm. The ship's AI voice crackled through the speakers. Enemy vessel in pursuit. Ravi looked at the screen. The Rothan general's warship was following them, faster than before. He's not letting us go, she said. He's hunting us. James coughed, trying to stay awake. He wants to finish what he started, he muttered. But we're not giving him that. Ravi stepped forward, her voice strong now. What do we do? James looked at her through tired eyes. We fight, he said, not because we want to, but because we have to. He handed Ravi a small silver device. This is the ship's override key, he said. If I can't fly, you will. Ravi's hands shook, but she took it. Her heart beat like thunder, but she didn't back away. She had run enough. The Rothan ship fired a missile, and the Aegis jolted. Hull damage alarms echoed through the cabin. James used the last of his strength to guide the Aegis toward a small moon nearby. A rocky surface will make it harder for them to track us, he said. Prepare for a hard landing. The ship crashed into the dusty moon, sliding over sharp rocks. Metal screamed as it tore through stone, then came to a stop. Inside, Ravi pulled James from his seat. He groaned in pain, his legs barely working now. You need to stay here, she said. I'll deal with them. James laughed, weak but proud. Since when did you start giving orders? Ravi smiled sadly. Since I met you, outside. The Rothan general landed his ship. He walked through the dust and darkness. Slow and steady. He was alone. He didn't need an army. Not for this. He reached the Aegis wreck, standing tall in front of the broken hull. Come out, human, he shouted. Let's end this with honor. But it wasn't James who stepped out. It was Ravi, her small figure walking through the dust. She held nothing in her hands but her mother's glowing pendant. The general laughed. The child, he said. You think you can face me? No, Ravi said, her voice calm. I don't need to fight you. I just need to outsmart you. At that moment, the pendant glowed brighter. Inside it was not just a tracker, it was a key. Her mother had hidden a full override code inside the pendant, connected to old human tech. Ravi pressed it, and the ground beneath the general shifted. James had used the last of the Aegis's power to arm the ship's defense system. Metal claws burst from the rocks, grabbing the general's legs. He roared in rage, trying to break free. Ravi ran forward, dodging his blade as he swung it wildly. She slammed the override device into the core unit near the wreck. A bright pulse exploded outward, blinding everyone. When the light faded, the general stood frozen. The override had locked his armor, turned it into a prison. He could not move, only shout in fury. James crawled out, leaning on the ship's wall. He looked at Ravi, his face filled with pride. You did it, he whispered. Ravi ran to him, catching him as he nearly fell. You showed me how, she said. James nodded slowly. Maybe, he said, but you had it in you all along. The moon was silent again. The battle over. Ravi's mother stepped out of the ship, her face filled with tears. She ran to them and held them both. In the distance, the Rothan ship exploded, unable to recover. Without its commander, hope had returned, but James's breathing slowed. His eyes fluttered as he looked up at the stars. Promise me something, he said to Ravi. Anything. She whispered. Don't stop helping people, he said, even when it hurts. Ravi held his hand. I promise. James smiled, and then everything was quiet. A new dawn. The stars above the moon were quiet again. The battle was over, but the galaxy had changed. Ravi stood at the edge of a cliff, watching the remains of the Aegis. Her hands were still stained with dust and tears, but her heart was full of something new. Not fear, not anger, but purpose. James Carter was gone. His body now rested in a small chamber inside the ship he built. A warrior's grave, among the stars, beside him. Ravi had placed the old fleet badge and the glowing pendant. The things that started it all. Her mother stood beside her, holding her gently. He gave everything, Ravi whispered. He saved us all. Yes, her mother said, her voice shaking. And now it's your turn to carry his light. Ravi looked up at the sky. She didn't feel like a child anymore. She had seen what humans could do. Not just fight, but protect. Not just destroy, but inspire. From the broken Aegis, they salvaged a signal core. Inside it was a message James had recorded before the final stand. Ravi played it on every secure channel she could find. The message spread fast, across sectors. 2 old allies and forgotten colonies. In the recording, James's voice was steady. If you're hearing this, it means someone stood up to the Routhans. It means a child crossed space to save her mother. It means the war is not over, because hope is still alive. The message reached more than just humans. It reached oppressed worlds, silenced species, forgotten planets. They saw the face of Ravi, young, brave, part alien, part human hope. They called her the Child of Aegis, a symbol that even the smallest voice can break the loudest silence, one by one. Hidden rebel groups sent her signals. They wanted to meet, to plan, to rise again, not for revenge, but for freedom. Ravi answered them all. She didn't promise victory, she only promised to try. On a small rebuilt vessel, Ravi now traveled between systems, her mother beside her, teaching, guiding. They carried James's story with them, and everywhere they went, others added their own. They met a warrior who lost her wings in the Rothan mines, a pilot who once flew beside James in the early fleet, a planet where children carved statues of Ravi in sand, calling her the girl who lit the sky. In the shadows of the stars, the Routhans watched. They tried to stop the message, block the signals, hunt the new rebels, but it was too late. They had killed a soldier. But they created a legend. One day Ravi stood before a gathering of leaders from 10 different species. Each had suffered, each had lost, but now, they were ready to stand together. She spoke simply, her voice clear. We're not here to take power. We're here to take back what was stolen. Our voice, our future, our right to choose. The chamber fell silent. Then one by one, they stood and nodded. It had begun, and somewhere, far beyond the known stars, maybe even beyond life itself. James Carter watched, smiling quietly, his final mission complete, not with weapons, but with hope, back on Earth, where no one had known his name for years. A statue now stood, built by Ravi's request, made of old metal and forgotten memory. At the bottom, it read, "Here stood a human, who did not run, who saw a child's tears, and chose to fight, who reminded the galaxy that we are never truly alone."